Without further ado, our good friend, Kathy Barnette. Kathy, let me read your tweet to get this conversation. Or do they still call it tweet? They call it post now on X. I still use the word tweet. Elon, don't be mad with me. Newsflash, this is Kathy. Newsflash, black culture is not the problem, fellow Republicans. There's something far more sinister at play. Remain focused. We have enough real problems that we don't need to invent any. The soft racism some of you are displaying and falling into is unacceptable. I didn't remain quiet when the left did it, and I won't remain quiet as the right does it. Hard stop. Kathy, what inspired you to tweet that?
Yeah. Over the last, I don't know, maybe a month and a half, probably mid-January to just recent, I'm noticing a number of our more melanin-challenged brothers and sisters in the Republican Party. We're all facing the same stresses and irritations, despair, hopelessness, depression at times. And instead of focusing on the issues, the root of our woes in this nation, the destruction of this country, instead, I'm finding them spend an exorbitant amount of their time talking about, quote unquote, I've heard many of them say the phrase black culture or black people, or are coming out with T-shirts that says, and these are some of those who purport to be conservative, saying the N word for Trump 2024, making comments like Martin Luther King Jr. was a bad guy, making comments like DEI is as a direct result of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and other things, just kind of useless, and putting a tremendous amount of focus in their mind that the root of our problems is black people, black culture, the degeneracy we see that is taking root in our nation is as a result, according to some of these posts, black people. And I saw this particular post of a young girl who says her survival is based on, what is that? I forgot the name of, what is it called?
OnlyFans.
Yes, thank you. OnlyFans. Yes. She was citing OnlyFans is the reason why she has survived many things in her life. And I just kind of retweeted that to say, listen, fellow Republicans, black people are not the reason for the degeneracy we see taking root in our country. Let's remain focused and let's not peddle or dabble in racism, whether soft or hard. It is unacceptable. Let's remain focused between now and the next 9 months.
And so you've said a lot there, and I want to start with the 1964 Civil Rights Act and people that are taking a look at that and connecting it to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's a legitimate conversation. And Vince Ellison and I had that conversation on this show. Virgil and Walker and I have had that conversation on this show. There's some difficult conversations that are going to have to be had in order for us to move forward, and the perhaps unintended consequences. I think most people believe, I think I can speak for Vince, I can certainly speak for myself, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was well-intentioned, but it had some unintended consequences that need to be discussed and evaluated, and there's going to be some difficult conversations about Martin Luther King's role in that. I think all of that is healthy, and I don't particularly, and I mentioned Vince and Virgil, they're both black, but I don't particularly care who sparks that conversation or wants to have that conversation, because it does impact all of us.
And my reason for chiming in at all on this particular topic is not because I particularly care about where people fall on these various issues, whether Martin Luther King Jr. was a bad guy, as one person quoted. I'm certain that he isn't Jesus, so I'm sure, like all of us, he's flawed. So whether he was a bad guy in certain respects of his life, I don't know. I don't particularly care about the conversation, whether or not we believe DEI is as a direct result of the nationwide passage of the Civil Rights Act. Again, I don't care where people fall on that particular topic. What I care about is the fact that in 9 months and in November of 2024, our nation is going to take a very decisive pivot in one direction or the other. And as I look at the Republican Party right now, I'm looking for a plan. I'm looking for a message that is going to add people to our voter roll. Because when you look at politics, it is nothing more than mathematics. Either you are adding or subtracting. Either you are dividing or multiplying. And I am looking at the business of how do we add and multiply people to the rolls who are going to go out and vote for Donald Trump and many other Republicans down that particular ballot. And when I look at conversations, when you're looking at some of these influencers who have just on Twitter alone 6 million followers, and every tweet they put out or post they put out is ranging between 2 to 4 million impressions. And it's not just one person, but it's a number of these particular conservative influencers. Influencers in this particular election is going to play an unprecedented role in getting our message out. And when you look at the message they're using, they're putting their attention on right now, I don't think that is going to be about the business of adding and multiplying the Republican Party. So again, we can talk about DEI. We can talk about 1964 Civil Rights Act. I wrote a book about it. I'm well versed in the nuances of it, so we can have that conversation. I just don't think it's helpful right now for certain people, especially those who are not Black, to have this particular conversation, especially not only if they're not Black, but they have close affiliation, or at least presumed to have close affiliation with Donald Trump. We know what the media is going to do with that narrative. And so I want us to be mindful. I want us to get a message. I want us to get a plan. And I actually want to win in 2024.
So what do you say to someone like myself who, and again, from my parents to everybody I know has a problem. I've never voted, and I struggle. You know, I plan to vote here this year. I plan to, but it's a plan. You know, I started out today planning not to eat any snacks, and you know, I've already had a handful of the veggie fries, and so, you know, the best laid plans for me some often go astray. But the reason I've never been that enthusiastic about politics is because, to some degree, not to some degree, but I don't think it matters nearly as much as values and culture, and so I'm not interested in a political strategy or what leads to the most votes. I think if you get people's values together, if people's values are elevated and they adopt and adhere to and actually follow a biblical worldview, they'll make the right decisions as it relates to eating snacks. They'll make the right decisions as it relates to pulling a lever in an election booth. And so that's why I'm so hyper-focused on, now let's talk about all this cultural stuff. Let's talk about the values we've adopted, and let's make sure we haven't overdosed on politics and can't properly evaluate things because we've just chosen a political team rather than a team based on shared values.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't disagree with you. You know, when I look at the Republican Party, you saw what they did to me when I ran in 2022. It wasn't the Don Lemons or the Democrats who came out and kneecapped my race that I earned. It wasn't the Democrat Party or Don Lemon or CNN or any of these people we would like to paint as the monster who came in and lied on me and told people I could be a member of Black Lives Matter. I mean, I'm Black. I could be, according to some of them. It was fellow Republicans, even some we would call MAGA Republicans. And so I am not here to put on a pedestal the Republican Party. What I am, but I am a realist. And in this political system, we have two parties. And if you're going to win and move the needle, you're going to be in one party or the other. I will never vote Democrat again in my life. And so that forces me to move over here into the Republican Party because, again, I'm a realist. The fact that we have an open border, it is as a direct result of values, but it's even a closer correlation because we have Biden in office, and Biden is in office because of votes. When I am going to my children's school to remind them that I am my children's parents and they don't need the school board to be their parents, that you will not be reading, transgenders will not be walking into my children's school and reading story time to my babies. That is as a direct result of the people who make up that board. And they make up the board because of people voting for them. And so this is like a big stew and a pot. It's a little bit of everything. And I agree with you that politics flows downhill from culture. And I spend a large amount of my time, my new organization, Be Better America, is not just looking at politicians, but it's also looking at we the people being better, doing better. I can't just blame Donald Trump or Biden for the various issues that we may have in this country, but I have to look at the people who are voting for them. But I also understand that culture flows downhill from entertainment, what people are watching, what people are listening to. And when I'm looking at various posts and tweets out here on Twitter, X, for example, I recognize that it is informing culture. It is actually informing values. And I want the Republican Party, since I'm stuck in this boat with everyone else, because either you're a Republican or a Democrat, I want to make sure that we're perfecting the party.
So again, I'm not a part of any political party, but like my values are like, I'm really heavy pro free speech. And so when you adopt those values, you're pro free speech, you're also saying like, yeah, conversation's gonna get rough and uncomfortable, and I'm just gonna have to deal with that because I'm pro free speech. People are going to say things that ruffle my sensibilities, but my values in promotion of free speech trumps whatever my sensibilities are. And so that's where the entire policing of what people say kind of violates my values, particularly as a journalist, as an outspoken journalist, and I think comedians are rubbing up against this. You can't say this or that, or you don't have the right skin color to say this or that. I'm just for letting everybody say whatever they want, and then if I do step into a voting booth, I'm going to just vote my values. And so a party that supports abortion, there's just, you couldn't put a gun to my head and make me vote for them. And I think the better play is to get people actually living out their values and adopting values consistent with the Bible and life. And then they won't be so, their feathers won't be ruffled when someone says something that makes them uncomfortable. Again, I'm Black. And when people say something about Black culture or whatever, I really couldn't care less because skin color is a very surface level thing. I'm a Christian. Now, if people want to get out here and start bagging on Christians, because that is my true identity, I'm going to bow my back up and say, hey, what are you doing? And I'm going to have a little problem with you. But if people want to criticize Black culture, particularly a culture that the world has defined as commercial rap music and a lot of other stuff that just violates my values, I'm like, yeah, I criticize it too. This, sexy red and all this other garbage, and I don't want anything to do with that. And so That's where obviously, Kathy, I love you to death, and that's why I have you on the show. And because you're not the only one having this particular conversation, and I think you and I can have a thoughtful exchange on this because there are other people that are making your exact same argument, and I wanted to have the conversation with you because I want to undertake, and so I want to go ahead.
Oh, well, I mean, like just a couple of things. You said made some great points. I too am all about free speech, and this is not about sensitivities. I really cannot care if you're Black and conservative, and you have decided you're going to be vocal about your values. You do not wear your feelings on your skin. You get tough real quick, okay? I have been called every name in the book. You think of it, I've been called it. Right now, it feels like an open season on Black conservatives where people on both sides of the aisles feel as though they can say whatever they want to say if you are a Black conservative. There are no protections, there are no guardrails put around Black conservatives. But here's so it's not about sensitivity. I'm all about free speech, but just like they have this free speech to say what they want to say, I also have the free speech, and I am going to exercise that free speech to say I think it's stupid. I think it's useless. I think, we can have this conversation on November 6th of 2024. But right now, can we please just pause for a moment and get a plan? Can we actually have a plan to win that actually adds people to our voter roll, that multiplies? Because this level of conversation is not going to bring Black people into Black working class, poor people, Black people, Hispanics. It's not going to bring those particular people over into the Republican Party, looking at a Charlie Kirk and others pontificating on whether or not we needed to have the 1964 passage of the Civil Rights Act. It's not going to add to our voter roll. So I find it to be useless. I'm wondering why we're not actually talking about things that matter. For example, illegals being dumped into these working class poor communities. That is a message that is going to resonate. I took Vivek to the south side of Chicago. I know for a fact that message is resonating within poor Black communities. And that is something that all of us need to use, all of our platforms to be pushing and having a conversation. Now, you want to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. on the day after the November 2024 conversation, please invite me back. I would talk about that all day. You want to talk about the 1964 passage, the antebellum South? I grew up in the deep South of Alabama on a pig farm. I have the blood of slaves coursing through my veins. I can talk about that all day. But can we put a pause on trying to monetize our tweets and trying to do clickbait kind of conversations? Because you're rich enough, you got 6 million plus Twitter followers. Can we just use all of that to actually get a plan that will allow us to win? Because again, I don't have a plan B. There's nowhere else I can go. America is my country. I spent 10 years making the decision that if I was called to lay my life down for this nation when I was in the military, I would have done it. I want to preserve this country for my children. And this kind of rhetoric and foolishness is just useless. It's clickbait. I mean, aren't you rich enough? Can we just focus right now, use that platform to come up with a plan that will actually add people to our voter rolls? I think that is a much better conversation. Now, I love talking about the Black culture because I think there is a Black culture. I take my children back down to the deep South once a year, and there's a lot of sages of wisdom down there. And one year I went down and I was asking my young Black cousins, what does it mean to be Black? And of course, the conversation stopped at skin deep, right? And then I walked up to a bunch of, old, wise people, and I asked the question, what does it mean to be Black? And one stood up and said, color, consciousness, and culture. Yes, Black, we prefer you to have the melanin. And I think Rachel Dolezal found that out very quickly. You actually have to be Black in order to be in the Black community. But then it goes beyond just skin deep. It's also a consciousness. about being Black. It's all experiences, the things that we think and stuff, and attitudes, collective attitudes about certain things. But also there is a culture, which is really just a outward manifestation of what we're thinking as a collective of Black people, the attitudes, but our beliefs, collective ways of behaving. So there is a culture, just like there's an Italian culture, an American culture, a Hindu culture. Black people also have a culture. And when I see other conservatives, I'm out here fighting. I'm being called a coon, an Uncle Tom, although Uncle Tom is not negative. They just haven't read the book. But I'm being called and dragged and set in all kind of names. But I'm out here fighting for these exact same values as my white conservative brothers and sisters are in the Republican Party. And it is something when you're out here fighting and then one of your own come around and punches you in the gut. And you're like, wait a minute. We're all on the same team. Don't conflate Black culture with degenerate behaviors. And that is what I meant by something much more sinister going on in my book, Nothing to Lose, Everything to Gain. I also talk about Lyndon B. Johnson and the degeneracy that came with his Great Society idea. There's something much more sinister. It's not just skin deep. So I'm asking my white fellow conservatives to focus on how do we create a message that will add people.
So I think there are people, and I would be counted among them, perhaps, that think that if people, I don't think we're going to win traditional Democrat Black voters who are offended about a provocative, inflammatory, raw conversation about MLK. Because when you say I'm a conservative or say I'm not pulling the Democrat lever, there's so much blowback that comes along with that if you can't handle a difficult conversation about MLK, you're not strong enough to go in there and pull that lever and deal with the consequences of not supporting the Democrat Party. And so the other thing I think there are, and I can't speak for Charlie Kirk, I could speculate, I can talk about me for sure, is I'm uninterested at this point. I've lived long enough, I'm 56, I've studied enough history at this point now that I feel very comfortable saying that skin color alliances will not work and will not produce any success.
I agree.
The only, well, now I get it, but so if so, then, Black identity, Black culture, what's it mean to be Black? That's the irrelevant conversation. And the conversation is, are you a Christian and are you willing to stand on these Christian values? Tell me what being a Christian means. And then when you answer that question, walk into that voting booth and ask yourself, are you voting your values or are you voting what will keep you in good social standings with your wife, spouse, husband, cousins, friend group, whatever. And again, the people that don't, because what people are arguing about MLK, what Jason Whitlock is arguing about MLK is he, perhaps unintentionally, but he led to a lot of this racial idolatry that has overtaken us, that has place skin color ahead of values. And so that's why people want to have this conversation. They want to, America's overrun with idolatry. That's why all these influencers, whether they're rappers or actors or whatever, they have so much influence. And that's silly. It's a group of idiots who have been bought and paid for by Hollywood, and somehow we care what they think. And we have, and again, I'm not the biggest holy roller, but I probably am. But again, we should consult this.
Absolutely.
on
I
every
agree.
single decision.
I
And
agree.
instead, we're consulting Cardi B or I don't know who.
But I don't think
LeBron James.
Cardi B is not the culture. Cardi B is not black culture. I know that there's a lot of conflating that's going on and saying that the Cardi B's of the world and I don't even think she's black. I have no idea. But that they are representing black culture, and then not just they, but anything that is degenerate. And I'm saying again, I am not here, nor was I on my Twitter trying to defend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or trying to even figure out where people fall on the passage of the Civil Rights Act. I really don't care what people think about those things right now. And maybe, I guess, a better conversation for the Conservative Party is to figure out, well, what are our priorities? For me, my priority is simply to win. I am tired of being a party of losers because it matters. When we lose, it matters. We're not just fighting against fellow Americans who are taking a different path to get to the same end result. No, we are literally fighting against communists. We're fighting against people who hate this country, who are trying to destroy this country. So for me, the overwhelming majority of my time is spent on how do we secure this nation? And now, obviously, I was working on the Vivek Ramaswamy presidential campaign. So I had someone else in mind that I thought would have been a better basket for us to put all of our eggs into as we go towards November 2024. However, the people have spoken, and the people have said in the Republican Party, we want Donald Trump. So I am jumping onto that bandwagon. And so my focus is, because this is what I do, right? I mean, I am a Christian. I'm not even here to defend that. And I love my country. Again, not here to defend that. Don't really care what people think about that. But what I am here to say is that as a Republican Party, we don't have enough votes within our party alone to overcome Democrats who are going to vote in November, to overcome the illegals who are going to vote in November, to overcome the fraud, the schemes, the shenanigans that the Democrat Party and many others are going to pull against us. And so if we're going to just throw out red meat so that we and our party can eat on it and cut it up and dissect it, that is a priority. I don't think it should be the number one priority. I think as someone who has walked behind the curtains at the state level here in Pennsylvania, 19 electoral college votes, as well as behind the curtains with the major presidential campaign, I am here to tell the American people, we don't really have a clear plan or a clear message. And so it has to be more than just bravado and rallies and beating of the chest. And our plan has to extend beyond saying we're not them. We have to actually have a plan that will move people, black, white, indifferent to me, but will move people out of apathy, out of complacency, who don't vote, but then also those who are moderate Democrats who are actually looking for someplace else to go. I think if you're going to focus on the black community, I wasn't playing identity politics. I'm responding to those who are in the Republican Party who are focusing on identity politics. And I'm telling them to remain focused and let's have a message that will actually bring people into the party. I wasn't quiet when the left did it. I'm not going to be quiet when I see the right doing it. We should be better. And if no one else is willing to say it, I will certainly be one who will put a stake in the ground and say, let's focus.
Is it a possibility, Kathy, that it's just two competing strategies, and everybody wants to win, and your strategy is, hey, I think we should avoid these topics until after the election because it's going to turn off too many people. And someone else's strategy, let's say Jason Whitlock's strategy, although I don't really care, is like, no, I think we need to address these issues because we need to explain to people how the abandonment of your Christian values are exactly how we got here to this open borders situation.
And I agree with you. So let's talk about that. So let's talk about those values. What I'm saying is talking about Black culture. This is not me talking about Black culture. That's them. Is not the be all of the end all of why we have open borders. There's a number of other issues. I'm always talking about Christian values.
Hold for 1 second though. Mm-hmm. Hold for 1 second though. As it relates to the border, it's directly tied to race. Directly. You turn on MSNBC right now, and there will be some white liberal and backed up by some Black people saying, oh, the browning of America. And, they just don't want these people of color. And so they defend the open borders by telling Black people, oh, the reason they don't want these people coming in here is because they're racist.
I agree.
And so they're using Black issues to sell their unbiblically sound, unfair policies that will end up further destroying the Black community.
I agree.
So the racial aspect has to be addressed.
So let's talk about that, Jason. And I think we should talk about that. I don't think we should talk about Martin Luther King Jr. being a bad guy. I think we should talk about exactly what you just said, is that how the left continuously weaponizes the color of our skin, the history of this nation, to say that we are a racist country, and that the only way we can absolve ourselves of this racism, according to the left, is that we just fling open our borders and allow people, we don't know who they are or where they're coming from or what their intent. We don't even know if they like us or not. We should just allow them to come in. I'm all for that conversation. What I'm not for is some ancillary conversation, but then we conflate it and make it seem like we're talking about open borders and the left using Black people as a tool to get what they want. So let's not conflate. Let's just talk about what you just talked about. I'm all about that. That's all I've been talking about. And I believe that is a winning message. Conflating, talking about Martin Luther, why didn't we talk about Martin Luther King Jr. last year? Why do we have to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. being a bad guy, which, again, I'm not here to defend whether he was a bad guy or not. Why do we have to talk about that right now and then pretend we're talking about open borders? Let's just talk about open borders. Let's just talk about how the left has manipulated the Black community for well over 60 plus years now to get what they want. And we are broken, and bruised as a Black community as a result of it. Let's have that conversation.
Well, they might be, and let's take they out of it, Jason Whitlock, and I'll speculate Vince Ellison, I'll speculate Virgil Walker and others. They might be arguing, like, once you go down that rabbit hole of, like, how did we get to open borders, and how did we get to people sitting on TV saying, hey, if you're against open borders, you're a racist. How did we get here? And so the further and further you go down that rabbit hole, the next thing you know, you might be looking dead in the face of Martin Luther King. And be like, well, dang, down this rabbit hole, it takes me right to MLK and the civil rights movement. And we may be at a time where people are ready to have that conversation.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think so.
You don't think people are ready to have that conversation?
About Martin Luther King Jr.? Absolutely not. Ain't nobody talking about Martin Luther King Jr. What we're talking about is these inflation. We're talking about the open borders. We're talking about police officers not being allowed to do their jobs. We're talking about, my son is 17, getting ready to turn 18 this Friday. My baby is going to have to sign up for, selective service. And now I also know we have a 25% deficit in our military enrollment. So where are we going to find all of these young, able bodies to go out here and fight wars and more wars all across this world? We're going to start drafting young boys. So these are the conversations I think we want to talk about transgenderism and the fact that there are only two genders and everything else is a mental health disorder waiting for a good psychiatrist to sit down and have a conversation. I think we want to talk about that. I think we want to talk about why is it that we have so many of our young people. I mean, we're in the throes of a mental health crisis among our young people right now. And I mean, I think these are the things. Fentanyl, 100,000 Americans dying every single year as a direct result of fentanyl, and the overwhelming majority of it comes through these open borders. I think those are the messages. Those are the things people are talking about. How do I know that? Because I actually work at the grassroots level and I am talking to people all across the nation. Last night, I did a Zoom call with 159 of the staunchest activists all across the state of Pennsylvania. And let me tell you, no one mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. being a bad guy. People were talking about a whole lot of other issues. And so that is my message. I have no malice against anyone. I love capitalism. If you want to do clickbait and monetize these stories because you think you're going to get greater impressions, and as a result, you're going to get a greater payout, I'm okay with all of that. What I'm saying is, can we just focus for a moment, and can we actually create a message and make sure that we're using these platforms that have 6, 7, 8, 10 million, 175 million people on Twitter? Every post they put out is about 2 million on average, and they're putting out maybe 10 posts a day. And I'm watching how mainstream media is using these little clips, like just recently, maybe a couple of days ago, again on Charlie Kirk's show. Charlie, got nothing against you. Love what you're doing. However, there was a young man who, dressed in military fatigue, went and set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in New York. And as I'm watching this young man, my heart is just like, oh my God, our young people, mental health issues. But on this particular episode of Charlie Kirk, one of the people who's on his show said people were commenting. He was commenting on how people were saying to the young man who set himself on fire, rest in power. But apparently that's a catchphrase you're only supposed to use for Black people. I don't know. But he was like, hey, but he did eventually turn Black. So he did become a Black person eventually because he burned to a dark crisp, I guess. That's what I'm saying. That's stupid. And it's useless. And to listen to these particular people snickering, it's just, you can have the conversation. I find it to be stupid. I find it to not be advantageous in helping us to win come November.
Let me say this, because you said a lot, but I just want to inject this into the conversation, particularly as it relates to the military, your kids being draft age, and how our military is actually falling apart. People aren't joining. Yeah. And part of the reason is because the left has led a conversation for a minimum 4 decades.
Yeah.
Demonizing the people from 1776.
Yeah.
And they're very comfortable talking about all the sins of the people from 1776 and demonizing them. And so, and all of that demonization has undermined patriotism in this country. People don't join the military, and people now, this founding document, we need to rewrite it. And no one that looks like me helped write this founding document, so it's no good. And so they have, for a minimum of 4 decades, but probably longer, been arguing that the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence and U.S. Constitution, they're evil, they're bad people, they own slaves. These documents they put together need to be overturned. And so for every action, there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction.
I agree.
And so people are like, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Ben Franklin, these guys aren't off limits, but Martin Luther King, he's untouchable.
I don't think he's untouchable.
Not going to fly.
I don't think he's untouchable.
Well,
I don't think he's untouchable at all. Have the conversation. What I'm saying is, what I'm offering, I have every right to do it, and I'm going to do it. What I'm offering is perhaps we should focus on an actual plan. What is our messaging? What is our messaging this year when Democrats come and say, Republicans want to control your bodies, women? What has been our message these last several elections is we take a ostrich head in the sand strategy. and pretend it's not happening. And Democrats win on that issue. We saw that last year with with all the school boards. I was in Iowa, and they lost almost every school board in the state of Iowa. And so when you come to the issues of transgenderism, when you come to the issues of bodies, these are the messages of the left. They have nothing else. They're going to lie. They're going to conflate. They're going to say all of these things. And when I'm looking at Republicans' messaging on these two issues alone that we know Democrats are going to pull out starting in August all the way through November. My question is, do we have a message yet on that, or are we still going to stick our head in the sand and pretend they're not saying it because it didn't work before? And what I'm
let
saying,
me ask you this though, Kathy. Let me ask you to give, particularly given your personal narrative, the my body, my choice, and the women make all decisions that relate to their body. It's basically the pro-abortion message.
Yeah.
There are people, there are political strategists that say, hey, look, Republicans, stay away from the pro-life messaging.
Yeah.
That's going to turn too many women off. Talk about it after the election or at a better time, because it's going to cost us votes. I'm against that. I want to talk about the abortion people virtually every day. And I want to explain to people how that mentality that life doesn't begin until the woman says it begins. And you know what? Even after they come out of the womb, if the woman's not particularly happy out in California, we're considering letting you kill the baby then too. I want to talk about that every day. And then when I go down that rabbit hole, you know where I'm going to end up is talking about Margaret Sanger.
Yeah.
And I'm going to end up talking about eugenics. And I'm going to end up talking about her relationship with the KKK and how Planned Parenthood is set up and kills, 30,000 black babies a year or how many ever it does, and how the impact it's had on black people. I'll end up talking about, and then at some point, as I start talking about that and nosing around, I'm going to say, man, you know who got the first Margaret Sanger Award? The very first Margaret Sanger Award. You know who got it?
Who?
MLK.
Didn't know
Isn't that interesting? So
yeah, that's very interesting.
I want to talk about it, and because it's all connected, and if it and I want to talk about it. If it costs the Republicans the election, I don't care. I truly don't care because
I truly do care.
I know that is the difference, because we're getting the leadership that we deserve.
I agree.
If we're really that evil, that we can slaughter babies in the womb, I hope Joe Biden gets 15 more elections and is president from the grave.
Yeah.
That's what we deserve.
And the Bible, like you mentioned the Bible many times. So, in Daniel chapter 1, the word of God says that the heart of the king the Bible says that the king is a reflection of the heart of the people. So I too believe we have the type of government we absolutely deserve. And perhaps we deserved Hillary Clinton in 2016. I came out immediately and said, this is a reprieve. God is giving us a reprieve. We deserved Hillary, but God is sparing us as a people. What did we do in those 4 years? I don't know if we did I know I certainly did not do as much as I could have done during those 4 years to secure our nation. But now here we find ourselves. And we're talking about socialists. So, yes, I do care about Joe Biden not winning or whatever puppet the Democrat Party is going to pick up, because I'm not convinced it's going to be Joe Biden. But whoever the Democrat Party put up as a candidate for 2024, I am extremely vested in making sure that person does not win and that Donald Trump wins. So I think it's really good. Now, does that mean, that I'm abdicating my Christian values? Absolutely not. And anyone who knows me know that that's not the case. And when I ran in 2022, the media came up with the word ultra MAGA just to describe me. I was the very first person they used that term on. And so If you know who I am, then you know what it is that I stand for. I'm not here to defend that. What I am here to say is that I just think, as one voice in the wilderness, in the wind, I think we should use all of these influences, use all of these platforms to come alongside President Trump. Donald Trump cannot do this alone. He is going to need the rest of us to get our head out of the sand and to go out and start talking to our neighbors, to go out and start banging on the doors, to look around and find something useful for me to do, and to perhaps run these things through the rubrics of our mind of, is this adding or subtracting? Is this dividing or multiplying? That's the rubrics I'm looking at. Now, it doesn't mean that I won't be willing to have tough conversations. Absolutely. I go straight to the Black community. I went into Black churches. Black Lives Matter in 2020 was not inviting me to go speak, but I would just show up, walk up on the stage and say, I'm Black, my life matter, and I'm going to talk. And I would talk directly to all of these Black people who generally don't come out to political events, and they will all applaud me. These are Democrats that I'm talking to, because I'm Black and I understand. I come from poverty. I come from underneath the bottom rung of the economic ladder. You know my story. I grew up extremely impoverished, in a home with no insulation, no running water, outhouse in the back, well on the side. And I'm so very grateful for this country. And I mentioned earlier, I have the blood of slaves coursing through my veins. And yet I recognize that we stand on the shoulders of some major giants, both Black and white. President Garfield, I'm reading about him right now. Amazing people, Black and white. And I believe I tell my children all the time, we have an obligation to live well, to do better, because of the sacrifices so many other people have done. Our country, I earnestly believe this, it's going to go in one direction or the other. Either we are going to be able to stave off the ultimate decline of this nation, or we're going to continue to go down this particular path of the Democrat Party. And I don't believe that we will long survive as a nation. So I do believe that this is a very consequential election. I actually want to win. I'm tired of losing. We've been losing since, 2018. I'm tired of it. We are a bunch of losers in the Republican Party. And I am just one voice in the wilderness saying, I think we can do better. Let's actually come together and come up with a plan.
Kathy, I'm giving you the final say. Thank you so much. I think this is a great conversation, an important conversation. We need to do this more often. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, my friend. Blessings.